what we find in our research with others, because unless you communicate with others, others will not know what we have done. And you also need to identify the gaps in the knowledge and suggest potential areas for future research. Basically, scientists have a responsibility to improve the living condition of the population. So whatever you do, ultimately, as the previous speaker talked, we need to improve the condition of the living in the society. But the major issues with our publication is that many times you may find lack of relevance, and there may not be enough novelty in the publication or research what you make. Sometimes we may not address the local issues, because if you are working in India, it is nice to have addressed our issues rather than addressing the issues in USA, UK or other countries. Sometimes you may find you made a paper written, but the methodology or the study design, there may be some issues which the editor will look into it. Sometimes you publish good paper, but the journal may not be accessible to other people. They may at least you may get an abstract, you may not have full access unless you pay money. So this is one of the problems with journals. Many of them are not freely accessible. And finally, whatever you have published may not really help anybody. It may not improve the care of the population. You must understand that scientifically and ethically whatever you do should be correct. Because if scientifically they find fault, it cannot be applicable in the real life situation. And whatever published should comply with the laws, regulation and the policies. It cannot go against that, which will create problem. And you should follow the principles governed by your professionals, and honesty and integrity of research is the most important. Suppose you do plagiarism, you cooked up data, one day it will come out and it will create problems. So be careful in whatever you write, whatever you publish. You must remember that scientific paper writing is not like a literature writing. People, they do not require the high standard of language. It needs to be understandable with simple sentences without too many jargons. So whatever you write should be simple so that people can easily understand. But the grammatical and spelling mistakes should not be there. So write simple, make simple sentences, avoid complicated literary writing. So long sentences, complicated sentence will confuse the reader more than helping them. So you may have different types of publication. You may make an original research work which you may publish. You may have a review article. I will spend a little more time on review articles because that can be done by spending time in reading and writing. And it will be easier because you do not require funding. You can sit in your room, you can sit in your house, you can do that work. So in a review, you may have a narrative review, or you may have a systematic review. You may also have case report, case series, commentary, editorial, opinion, letter to editor. All these things can be written. But of course, each one will be valued depending upon the application and what you have written. In an original research study, you may have a randomized control trial which is supposed to have the highest evidence. You may have some observational studies like cross-section study, case control study or cohort studies. All studies have their own values, but some will have more value than others. So once you have done a research or once you have done a review, you should say where you will publish. So you should identify a journal carefully, because what you have written, the content of your study or material should be in line with the journal in which you are planning to study. So you should look for many journals and see where it will fit. Suppose some journal is publishing only case reports. If you write a full article, they will not accept it. Similarly, a journal which is publishing only original research work, if you send a review article or a case report, they will not publish it. So read the instruction, look at the earlier published articles, which will give an idea how you need to draft the article, because each journal format may be slightly different from each other, although they follow the general format. You should follow the format of the journal to which you are publishing. It is also important to look at the indexing, because people will read mostly the index journal articles, and your citation and H index can go up only if you publish in a good index journal which has got a higher impact factor. So generally we say that PubMed, Scopus or Web of Science indexing is good because they are more likely to be seen by others. And if you are able to publish in a high impact factor journal, it is better. It does not mean that an article which you have written in a lower impact factor will not be read. If it is an important issue, they may still read, but the chance of your article being seen by others and read will be better if you publish in a higher impact factor journal. You should also look at the time of acceptance from the submission date, which the journal will take. Some journals will come only twice a year. Some journals may come 3 times a year. Some will be monthly, some will be weekly. So you should also see how much time, how often they produce the issues and how much time they take. All these things have to be taken into consideration when you submit the article. Otherwise, after 1 or 2 years, the article comes in print, then probably by that time many other articles also may come up. Most of the journals follow this IMRAD format. I hope that all of you are familiar with that. I for introduction, then the methods, results, and discussion, of course, references, acknowledgement, all those things will be added to it. Anytime if you want to stop me and ask questions also fine, you can ask questions question at the end also is fine. Now the question comes, who should be the authors? So we talk about the authors because this causes confusion many times. Because you are not discussed earlier when you are planning a study or writing who should be the authors. Some people will come and complain that I have done a lot of work, sir, but I don't find my name in the publication. Some people may say that once, suppose the journal article gets removed or some problem comes, they say that I don't know, my name was put, he never told me that he has put my name. So those things also may happen. But many good journals now want all authors to say that we have read and understood what is written and we are part of the study. Because later you cannot say that my name has been put by that person without my knowledge. So he should make a substantial contribution to the conception, design, data, acquisition, analysis or interpretation of the data. These are the guidelines which are given by the International Journal of Medical Publication. So drafting and revising the manuscript for intellectual content, final approval of the manuscript is subject for publication, and it is always better you decide who should be the authors when you plan the study or when you start the writing, and then you plan it. Otherwise, there may be a confusion sometimes, which should always be avoided. Just because somebody is your supervisor, somebody is your head of the department, it does not automatically give you the right to become an author. Although I talked about IMRAD format, how it appears in a journal, but when you are writing, you do not go in the same order. First, you start with the methods, because method is a very important thing. Always your title, objective, and methodology should match. If there is a confusion, obviously the article will get rejected. So, write a methodology in details, put the table and figures which will help you in writing the results. So, this part should be completed first when you prepare your manuscript. Introduction will come next, although introduction in the paper will come in the beginning, but when you write it will be later. So, introduction basically should tell what is the knowledge gap at present and with what objective you are going to, or what is your aim in doing the study. Then comes the discussion. You will put the keywords and title. Finally, last you will write the abstract. So, if you read the journal, abstract will be first. Abstract will be first, but when you actually write your manuscript, abstract will be the last, because it should give the full summary of whatever you have done or whatever you have drafted in the manuscript. Am I going very fast? Is it okay? Okay. So, the title page should contain the title of the article. It should contain the names of the authors, affiliation, where the study has been done and where the authors are placed, that should be indicated. And who will be the corresponding author? Corresponding author is the main person in the study, because he will be the editor and the journal will communicate with the corresponding author. So, he should know everything what has been done. He may not be the first author. Corresponding author can be different than the first author. First author is the main person who has done the study. Corresponding author is the main person who is responsible for the drafting, completing everything. Sometimes it can be both, can be same. If he is the main person in everything, he can be the corresponding author as well as the first author. You should also give the address, mobile number, email ID, so that if there is any confusion or any more understanding is required in your manuscript, they will communicate. After your publication, the paper, people will read. If they have some confusion, if they want to do a study similar to yours, then they may correspond with you. So, always there will be a communication address should be given. The title should not be very long. Sometimes we are in the habit of writing half a page title. So, it should not be there. It should be very short, but it should be attractive. Keep it less than 20 words. Some journals also expect you to write the type of study also, whether it's a randomized control trial, whether it's a cross-sectional study, whether it's an observational study, whatever type of study you have done. Generally, title and objectives, there should be no abbreviation. And if abbreviation is given, it should be within the bracket. Always expansion should be given. So, in title and your objectives, usually you should not write any abbreviations. And avoid in the title the redundant words like study on. There is nothing to say study, everything is a study. So, why you want to study a study on this, study on that? That should not be there. And never claim this is the first study in the world, first study in South India, first study from India. Because you will never know that so many people would have done. The people will object for what your the term first study, because without your knowledge there may be many studies. So, do not overclaim than what actually is there. Now, some examples of the title. People wanted to study whether benzathine prophylaxis in children with rheumatic fever, rheumatic heart disease, complaints, whether they are taking properly or not. So, the study, if you put a title like that, it may be too much use of words, more confusing. So, simple will be like complaints of benzathine penicillin prophylaxis among children with rheumatic heart disease. So it may be a cross-sectional study, or it may be a study with the observation study over a period to see whether the compliance is good or not. There are two scores, PRISM, the pediatric risk mortality score, the pediatric index mortality score. Somebody wanted to compare which will give you better indicator of the mortality in a pediatric intensive care. So you can write something like comparison of pediatric risk mortality and pediatric index mortality score in assessing the mortality in a tertiary care pediatric ICU. So make it more understandable, simple, use less words as possible, but give an indication what you are going to discuss in your paper. Now, somebody wants to study whether prophylaxis for prevention of transmission of blood-borne infection among people who are working as an occupational exposure, so anything, whether they are aware or not. So it can be made more simple, like awareness of prophylaxis for prevention of occupational-related blood-borne infections among healthcare workers. So what I'm trying to say is that don't make it too long, don't make it too confused, make it simple, better understandable. So the abstract, so some points in the abstract, most of the journals abstract will expect the abstract to be structured. Sometimes it may not be structured. Whether it's structured or unstructured, the content of an abstract remains the same. In the sense you have to make the abstract very impressive, because the editor as well as the reader first look at the abstract of your paper. If the abstract is impressive or it gives some information, then they will read the whole paper. If your abstract is poorly written, the paper may get directly rejected without even going through the content of the paper. So we should be very, very careful in making a good abstract for a paper, and it should be impressive, because it is the first one which comes in the publication. Structured or unstructured abstract depends upon the journal. So when you send for a journal, you should see in what format the abstract should be written. Normally, an abstract should not be too long. Ideally, it will be about 250 words. So it should give the background and objective of the study, the methods, results, and conclusion. That should be in your abstract. So you should give why this study has been done, what is the main objective, and how the methodology has been done in brief, and what is the important finding which you have seen, and what conclusion you have made based on your study. And always put 4 to 5 keywords. The keywords should be carefully selected, because anybody wants to read or get some knowledge in that topic of his research, they will look for keywords. So when you download articles, you will put the keywords to download articles related to your study. So your keywords should be very, very carefully selected, so that when you put the keyword, you will be able to download the articles related to that topic. Am I clear up to here? So in a structured abstract, as I said, there will be objective, methods, results, conclusion, and 4 to 5 keywords. Now, when you write the introduction, you give the problem statement and the main purpose why this study has been done. How is the problem which you identify going to be addressed in your study? What is the knowledge gap and the limitation in the previous studies? What are your main aims and objectives? All these things should come in the introduction. Or in other words, you should justify why your article needs to be read or to be published in your introduction. And the introduction should not be very long. It should not be more than half a page. Maybe maximum 2 to 3 paragraphs in an introduction. It should not be more than half a printed page, or maybe 1 to 1.5 type pages. In the material and methods, when you come, where and when this study was conducted. It's very important to say where you have done and when it was done. What are your outcome which you have looked for? Give the methodology in detail, because if somebody else has to repeat your study or do a similar study, he should know what you have done. So the methodology used should be in detail, and what is the study design and population which you included, inclusion, exclusion criteria, and if you used a questionnaire, whether the questionnaire has been validated. If it is already been published, freely available, then no need to validate. But if you used any new questionnaire, it has to be validated. So that also should be included in your methodology, and whether you have taken ethical committee clearance. Ethical committee clearance is a must. If human studies, even if you talk to a person, when you publish, there should be ethical committee clearance. Even if it's a retrospective study, ethical committee clearance is a must. And if it is an RCT, then CTRI registration is also must. If your RCT is a regulatory trial, then there need to be a clearance from Drug Control General of India. CITSCO also you should have a clearance. But if it is an academic trial, there is no need for CITSCO registration or permission. It is only RCT, CTRI, Clinical Trial Registry of India registration is enough. And you should always mention how did you decide about the sample. Sample is very, very important, sample calculation. So you should consult a statistician before you write your proposal itself, because at the end of your analysis you find the sample size is insufficient. You may conclude, I'm sorry, I should have taken more sample, I will do another study. Then why did you do the study? That question will come. So always calculate the sample size, take enough sample, because don't waste manpower and money for repeating nothing. And always it is better to put, it must be put, your consort diagram and Stroh flowchart in the methodology, because it will give an understanding to the person who is reviewing your article what actually you have done, how you have gone about. So consort flowchart is basically, it is the consolidated standard of reporting trials. In all RCTs, consort flowchart should be there. That means how you have recruited the patients, how many were excluded, how many have been randomized, and what you have done, how you evaluated. So in a consort chart, all this should be written. Stroh flowchart you use for other studies like case control study, cross-section study, cohort studies. Basically, Stroh stands for strengthening of the reporting of observational studies. So these flowcharts should be written in your methodology. In all journals, they will expect you to put these charts. So if you take a consort flowchart, so you have initially the enrollment, then you have the exclusion criteria. Based on that, you have excluded so many people. Then you have done randomization. You have a control group. You have a treatment group. Then what you did with them. And finally, how it was analyzed. Is it okay? Now, you may have a Stroh flowchart where you may have how many people have been you have selected and how many have been excluded based on your exclusion criteria, how many have been enrolled, and the groups, how many patients were there in each group. The results the section when you come, discuss the sample characteristics initially. How the sample characteristics, then put the tables and figures. Many people repeat table, then figure, then in the text. Everything, same thing, they will keep on repeating. But when you publish, people will also look at the number of pages, whether you are repeating too much. So what you put in the table, Again, you should not repeat in the text, only highlights the interpretation only you should give in the text. So do not put too many tables and figures. Normally in an original article, people will expect not more than 4 to 5 tables and figures. But if you are too many, some people may say you put as an appendix separately, don't put in the main content. So the text should contain our important findings and interpretation of what you have found in your research study. Is it okay up to here? So remember, all tables should have a title and you should have a number, so that when you write or refer to it, the reader will know which table you are you have to look at. And you should also write in the top of the columns what actually you have put below and what observation have been done and the significance, the p-value. So all tables should be similar, showing the important findings. You may also show a graph. Don't put a graph again for a data already shown in the table. So if you think that certain things can be shown better in a graph, then you need not have to put a table. Like infant mortality, how it has come down over the years, just by looking at it, it gives a good impression that it is. That means all your measures which you are taking for reducing the mortality is working. You can also show it like a pie diagram. There you can show different things, causes of mortality, like preterm and birth with complication is the major part. So by looking at this picture, you know which is the most common, which is the less common. This will give an impression to the reader and also the planner how to tackle the or reduce the neonatal deaths. Here, the neonatal mortality, infant mortality, all shown in the same graph with the different colors. So not only it tells you how the mortality has come down, but also what proportion of the mortality, infant mortality, is given by neonatal mortality, early neonatal mortality, late neonatal mortality. So this type of graphs will give an impression immediately by looking at the graph, what is happening with the mortality rate. So what I am trying to say is that use your tables, graphs judiciously, so that it will give a better impact to the reader. So in the research, the table title and number, as I said, always the table title and number will be on the top, the figure title and description will be on the bottom. It is the general rule, and p-value and confidence interval to be given in the table if it is applicable. When you come to discussion, generally don't write too long a discussion. Discuss the issues which you have observed compared to others' observation. And also, if there is some new findings, why it has happened, what is your explanation for that, what is the probable thing, that only need to be written in the discussion. Generally, it should not exceed 1,000 words. Give the major findings of your study. Do not repeat the results again in discussion. Whatever results and the interpretation you have written, only the finding, give an explanation in your discussion. And always compare with the other study and give reasons if you find any difference. What does your study add to the existing knowledge? At the end, you conclude by saying that what you are trying to say, you have done a big research, you have written everything, then what actually the knowledge or skill, whatever you want to communicate to the other, that should be told. So concluding, either conclusion can be written separately, or your last paragraph can be in a conclusion. And always try to mention what are the limitations. So the money may be a limitation, facility may be a limitation, or you may not have enough cases. So now some people have done COVID studies. By the time COVID went, so halfway through they could not get sample. So what to do? So you have to say it is a limitation study. If you have enough data, you can publish. If you not have enough data, you can only write a letter to editor, say that I have started but could not complete. So now I will briefly talk about how much more time you are giving. 10 is okay. So review paper. Review paper is very, very important, although you may have to take a lot of time. Many people will read review paper because it gives a consolidated impression about the existing knowledge. So review paper is more than a annotated biographies. You are not just listing the articles, but you read the articles, make your understanding, then you write a review paper. So one of the most important thing is you have to do a thorough review of literature. So unless you have gone through the earlier publications, you cannot write a review article. So many journals will look at the people and then they will invite review articles. That if you have published some articles on this topic, they may say, why don't you write a review article on this topic? Or at least they should have some experience in the field. But if you are a new person who want to write a review article, it is always better to write to the editor and check whether your review article he will be interested in including in the journal. So basically you are identifying the knowledge existing, interpreting and writing. So it should be like a grandmother telling the story. So it should be sequentially written so that people will be interested in reading. Basically, a review article may be a narrative review or a systematic review. I hope all of you know what is the difference between a narrative review and a systematic review. You want to try? What is the difference? So narrative review is basically you collect all the information, then you write. Whereas in a systematic review, you go by a very systematic method. So you have to tell how you have approached that problem. You have a problem, how you approach, how you have looked at the articles, how you have analyzed. It is a combination of scientific analysis of various publications. Whereas a narrative is just like a storytelling, whereas in a systematic review, scientifically analyze the data and then write. When systematic review, the data you combine and analyze, then it becomes a meta-analysis. In the sense, one person would have taken 100 cases, another person 200, another person 300. So you combine all those and analysis together, and then it becomes a meta-analysis. So why review papers are important? It provides extensive information on that. It gives a critical evaluation of the existing knowledge, creates good understanding of the topic, identifies the gaps in the knowledge. So once you read a review article, you will get an idea what I can do more, what more better research I can do, or what new research I can do. So if you look at the impact factor also, the review articles get the highest number of citations, because many people will be reading review article. It reduces your burden of reading many articles because already the reviewer has made a article based on many of the previous studies. Next citation will come to the letter, and then comes the full paper. Although the importance of a study may be different, the citation will vary depending upon how people read and cite your articles. Now, when you write a review article, you should think yourself whether I know the stuff enough and which journal I should submit, and whether the manuscript will be considered for publication. It will all be depending upon your experience, the way you write, the topic and the journal. So you read the published work, filter after that, after collecting all that. Some will be relevant, may not be relevant to your study. So non-relevant you remove, relevant one you add, then synthesize the information. So you can go into various sites if you collect too many unimportant or less important articles are there, you may get drowned in the information, then you should try to come out. So what you do is, you collect articles, and as you are collecting the articles, you should have a screening method so that the important or essential ones are collected and analyzed. So in a review article, the background material which is broadly relevant to your topic when you review the articles, and then you select and important articles you put together and analyze and write. So there are 10 basic principles for writing a review article. One is you have to define the topic, what you want to do, and whom you are going to address the audience. Audience may be from different specialty. It is always better to have a wider audience because more people will read. Ultimately, what you have written should be read by others. So you should have relatively broad topic, but it should be more focused. Otherwise, what will happen? The people who are reading may get confused. So you search and research various literature, and if you find already review articles has been written on that topic, do not worry. Still you can write a review article. You see what is the problems in the previous review article, what are the limitations. You can approach from a different angle. So still your review article may be important. So as I said, you use some searching for literature, apply some rules. You can use various websites for downloading the articles, and while you are downloading and reading the articles, make a notes. That is also equally important. Now you may have a mini review or you may have a full review. Both are important. Mini review, the content will be shorter. People may find it easy to read, but it may not give all information. Whereas a full review, the content will be large, but whether people have time to read, that also you have to see. So how you want to communicate, how many audience you need to address, based on that you can decide. And also depends upon the journal. Some journals may say that you should make it shorter. Some may say that, okay, you write longer. So narrative review versus systematic review, I already said. When you add the analysis of the data, then it becomes a meta-analysis, and all systematic review has to be registered with Prospero. So in this site you have to register, because people should know that you are already doing a systematic review. If it is a narrative review, there is no need for registration, but most of the good journals will expect that you register your systematic review before you start in Prospero, the website you have to register. So I will not go into the details. You may write an editorial. Editorials are usually written by an expert in the field, or editor of the journal, or a section editor may write. Actually, there are many papers, 3-4 papers related to topic. So you may write an editorial with covering everything, your impression, so that it will give an idea. And any journal, if you see, the editorial will tell you what are the articles you may have to read in that journal, because it gives the importance to the topics covered. Commentaries are something like a mini review, where the editorial board or an expert in the field will write briefly about some important findings or some important issues which are published. So I will skip many slides, because I think the time is not enough. So the steps required will be the defining and refining the search items, identifying the appropriate database, define and applying the inclusion-exclusion criteria, and managing the data and logging into the details in a systematic review. As I said, always you try to be focused, but try to cover larger audience. And whatever you write, you should be critical but consistent. Don't abuse you in your writing, but you should critically analyze the data and find a logical structure. It is always better to take feedback from your colleagues and friends. Of course, they may give you an idea how to improve your writing. So don't hesitate to consult others. It may be your mentor, it could be your colleague, it may be your friend, doesn't matter. So the ninth rule will be including your own relevant research. Many times what happens, the journal editor will see whether you have published anything on that topic. That adds to your likelihood of getting accepting in the journal. But some people are enthusiastic. They will connect somewhere their article so that the citation will increase. So over enthusiastically adding also will not be good. But some people will be very submissive. They will not want to tell what they have done. So both are bad. So be judicious and cite the articles at the appropriate level. Always be up to date when you do a review of presentation, but do not forget old issues, because from the old issues only the new issues will develop. So components will be define the research question, the scope of the study, and clarify the points. And at the end, you have to give a brief summary and conclusion and give some key words. Correct grammar, spelling are important, and always do plagiarism check before you sending. Sometimes plagiarism may be unintentional, you may copy, but it is always better to do a software screening for after you complete your writing. And as I already said, it is better to consult the journal editor before submitting, because if they are not inclined to take your the article, then sending it will take time. So better consult before you send. So when you write a conclusion for any of your write-up, it should not be too long. It's 3 to 4 sentences, and all conclusion whatever you have written should be based on what you have written above. So you cannot suggest something for the future which is not related to your study, and it should not contain more than 100 words, and add one sentence on future directions. Always acknowledge the people who have helped you, funding agency or people who worked with you. If they cannot become authors, but they can be acknowledged. Always mention the competing interest. That is also equally important. And what each author has contributed. Many journalists now ask, what have they done to your article? That also should be given. And the references should be in a review article or a original article, not more than 25 to 30 in number usually. And important references you cite, and you list them as per the journal. I will not go into the details. Most of the journals will use Vancouver style. So go through the Vancouver style, and of course now there are softwares which will put in the style of the journal, which you put the journal, they will rearrange according to the journal style. So when you take from the online or from a book, it will be different. When you take from a journal, it will be different. Ethics related to publication, I think I will not go into the details. Madam is shaking her head, and I hope that so after some time the head shaking will stop. So I will go to the conclusion. But plagiarism is one of the very, very important issue. The previous speakers also have talked about plagiarism. Plagiarism can be self-plagiarism. Plagiarism can be from others. If you send your articles with the same material to journals, it is also plagiarism. So you cannot even rewrite what you have written without mentioning where you have done what you have done. And many times it may not be it may be plagiarism of others' work. So you should be very, very careful. And review process, I will not go into the detail because it will take some more time. So once you submit an article to a journal, the editorial group will just first see whether anything is there inside which can be published. And if they do not find anything interesting, your abstract is not impressive, or your title and this thing is not impressive, they may reject. That's called a discouragement. Many times what happens, the person who sends first time publication, it comes next day, it comes back rejected. He is upset, then he will go into shock. Next few years he will not work. So this type of thing, never get disheartened, because all people, even experienced writers also have gone through all the stages, not leave alone the new writers. So, but you should be very careful. It will go to a reviewer, then the reviewers will give their comments. Address each issue raised by the reviewer in a diplomatic way. Do not try to show off that you know more than the editor or reviewer, although you may be knowing more, but you cannot show it off, because the moment you show it off, he may think you are overrating, he will say reject again. So it will become a problem. So you be diplomatic, but scientifically it should be correct. If you are contradicting a reviewer, you should have a strong reference. You should give the reference why I am not agreeing with your point. It is not that you cannot write contradicting his observation. So life cycle of published article, 62% of the published article, this is taken from a journal, have been rejected at least once. And rejection will be usually higher in a higher impact factor journals. And rejection may vary from 10 to 80% depending upon journal. Very high impact factor journal, if you send, majority of the articles will get rejected only. They may not get published. And 1% of the published articles have been rejected from 4 to 5 journals. So you can understand the patience of some people who write papers. So various reasons, already the previous speaker also talked about why the scientific research and the publication may get rejected. Major issue is that your methodology may not be good enough, language may be very poor, and poor quality of writing, and there may be violation of ethics. Although ethical committee, he may say, right, I have taken ethical committee clearance. Then they will ask, produce the ethical committee clearance, he will not have ethical committee certificate. Then it will become an issue. Or the ethical committee might have overlooked some issues, might have given permission, but the other person may not agree with the ethical clearance. Take home message, identify a suitable journal for publishing your research finding, follow the guidelines of the journal, give authorship who need to be authors. Do not miss anybody, because it will cause confusion and problems. Acknowledge those who helped you, but do not become authors. Take feedback from colleagues, correct spelling and grammatical mistakes to be checked. Check plagiarism before submitting. Answer the review question carefully, and thank you very much. I think I can take 1 or 2 questions if you want. I think I have covered my time fully, maybe.
Thank you, sir. You have you have walked through how to write a scientific paper. I feel like we have attended a BMG workshop for half the entire thing in 45 minutes. Thank you very much for that, sir. And you have talked about how to write a review article also, which we didn't have much of an idea.
Any burning questions?
Any questions? Any queries?
I think I have talked too much now. Probably do not want to ask any questions. No problem. You can ask me.
Sir has covered probably the entire thing, so they don't have questions.
You can ask me later also. You can ask me privately also. No problem.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I'd like to invite our Dean HP, Dean Health Professions Education, Dr. V.N. Mahalakshmi, to present the memento to the resource person, Dr. Vishnu Bhat, sir. Thank you, sir. Now we'll break for high tea served outside. In another 5 to 10 minutes, we'll join back because we have another next interesting session on how to communicate with the public.